Well, welcome everybody, and good morning. My name is Andrew Jackson, and thank you all for coming to this wonderful event in this amazing environment, right? Pretty cool. This morning we're going to have a couple of different things. We're going to start with a fireside chat, or perhaps more accurately, a plain-side chat, with a frank discussion with Leo Lax and our special guest, Marc Yi. And they'll be talking about the landscape of early-stage VCs in the Valley, technologies of interest, as well as trends in valuation. Later, you will also see our own LSpark Accelerator startups in action. They will be pitching here live in front of our audience of angels, VCs, champion corporate partners, and our startup community members. So, as always, we encourage you throughout the presentation to follow the conversation on Twitter at LSpark Global, and you can always use the hashtag #MeetMarcYi. So first off, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Leo Lax. Leo is the managing director of LSpark, the first Canadian incubator and accelerator with an exclusive focus on enterprise software that is cloud and SaaS-based. The Ottawa-based incubator and accelerator aligns entrepreneurs and startups with sector-focused venture capital firms, angel investors, champion partners, and dedicated mentors that work together in a high-touch partnership with the startups. LSpark's objective is to support a deal flow of fundable enterprise startup companies and support an enterprise-focused startup ecosystem here in our region. As managing director of LSpark, Leo brings with him valuable experience as a practiced veteran of both the corporate and entrepreneurial sides of building startups. Prior to founding LSpark, Leo was the managing director of Navon Ventures, as well as the co-founder of SkyPoint Capital, an early-stage venture fund. His first exposure to building companies and supporting entrepreneurs in growing their startups was while employed at Newbridge Networks as Assistant Vice President and member of the Chairman's Executive Council. In that role, Leo established and directed the Newbridge Affiliates Program, beginning in 1992, and was instrumental in the launch of 16 Newbridge affiliates. So with that, I'd like to welcome Leo to make some opening comments.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for coming and sharing with us this wonderful time. As I mentioned before, and some of you have heard before, we are here all about you, the entrepreneurs. Many of us have been around for a while, have seen the entrepreneurial environment in Ottawa go from huge highs to very lows, and then again, hopefully from now on, going again to the next level of highs. We have a great number of amazing entrepreneurs. In our 2 application sessions we've had at LSpark, we've connected to over 400 or 500 entrepreneurs on an active basis who are interested in to hear what we are doing and how we are doing. That's just an early indication of the type of energy we have in our ecosystem over here. So we are about 2 things. On one side, we are here to allow entrepreneurs to understand and gain from the experiences of high-level mentors in accelerating their companies from where they are today to where they become eventually a global corporation that can actually dominate a segment of their market. On the second part of our mission is to build an ecosystem in Ottawa so that entrepreneurs feel comfortable, feel safe, and feel rewarded for establishing their corporations right here in Ottawa today. I'm excited to be part of that environment. Terry Matthews, who is a co-founder of LSpark and the funder of our activities going forward and in the past, is also equally excited and has been a huge supporter and making us capable to come here and do this every day. For all of our team members, it's really an amazing environment, and it's exciting for me personally to see the support and the enthusiasm going forward, and hopefully we can see that happen and again. There are many solitudes in Ottawa from a tech point of view. Many of you know about the entrepreneurial initiatives that are happening in a downtown Ottawa area, in a West End Canada area, the specific gaming community that is around the market, the fresh founder teams who are developing their own initiatives going forward. We feel that, and I'm sure I share this and you share this with me, that we are too small an ecosystem to live separately. So we are actively engaging with all of our separate communities, and through this kind of events, hopefully bring Ottawa together so that we can actually become that safe and highly productive environment for the entrepreneurs to come here to establish their companies and grow their businesses and make a difference. Without further ado, again, thank you very, very much for coming. I'm hoping you're going to find the talk with Marc interesting, and our companies that are going to be presenting interesting as well. A little bit about the companies. These are the two companies in our accelerator. Some of you may have seen them before. And the key environment I think you should take away from here is not so much where they are today, but to see how they came from where they were before to where they are now, and where we believe they're going to be able to become one of these global corporations over the next 6 to 9 months as they graduate from our accelerator in the late fall timeframe. So before, I'd like to thank again Jamie, who has made all of this work happen and created this environment here for all of us to enjoy. I love this place. I mean, I did not know that we could have a tech gathering in such a fantastic environment. To see all of these amazing machines, it reminds me that these machines are also the creation of innovative minds. And I'm hoping that through our own activities here and with you guys together, we can have those innovations come into our sector and have enterprise software become the hub in Ottawa going forward. Again, thank you very much, everybody. And now I'm going to hand it over to Andrew.
Thanks, Leo. Actually, Leo, you can feel free to join us up here.
Pardon me.
No worries. You're doing great. Okay, and you may have a seat if you wish.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Anything else?
that's all. Okay. Would you care for a refreshment?
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Oh, you're sorted. Okay, good. Next up, it is my genuine pleasure to welcome Marc Yi to our region and to our event this morning. Let me give a brief introduction here about Marc. Marc Yi is a vice president at Intel Capital and serves as managing director of the Internet, Digital Media, and Education sector at Intel Corporation. He leads an investment team that invests in the global internet and consumer technology ecosystem. The group has invested in more than 70 companies in 20-plus countries. Marc is a board member and observer for several of the group's portfolio companies, including Delivery Agent, UI Evolution, Avnera, and Healthination, and serves on Intel Capital's investment committee. Marc and his team's most recent investments include Schoology, Elacarte, Nexmo, Box, and Kabam, just to name a few. Marc earned a Bachelor of Science in Economics from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania and previously attended the ICADE School of Business in Madrid, Spain. He serves as Intel's representative at Turner Agassiz Charter School Fund as a board member of the Tiger Labs, a digital health seed fund, and accelerator. As well, he serves as an advisory board member for the National Venture Capital Association's Corporate Venture Group. Marc, please join me in welcoming Marc Yi. Now, gentlemen, I'll leave it to you to have the fireside chat. I will be back with a roaming mic for questions from the audience in a little bit.
I think you're on.
I'm on. Okay. Cool.
Can everybody hear both of us? Well, Mike, thank you very, very much for coming. I appreciate it. You've taken a little detour to our little town of Ottawa. I understand this is your first time here in Ottawa.
Yeah, no, thank you, and it's really a pleasure to be here. First time in Ottawa, and great to see a great setting. And thank you for the invitation to be able to share my story with all of you. So thank you.
So what do you think of Ottawa so far?
I love the rain, first of all. I think the energy is there. I love the several people that I spoke with the last night at dinner and then this morning. I think there is an excitement about innovation and technology. So I look forward to having the conversation this morning and continuing the relationship with the tech community in Ottawa. Yeah.
So last night you mentioned that actually there was a question. I'd like you to repeat the question on if anybody here knows what the name Intel stands for. Oh, there is one. Go ahead. Oh. Speak up real hard. Well done.
That's great.
Go ahead.
Yes.
You said integrated electronics. I think that's a very 21st century style name, electronics, don't you think? Anyway, go ahead. So Intel, Marc has been with Intel for a while. Why don't you give us a little bit of why Intel Capital exists and how Intel's enormous reach is actually extended through Intel Capital?
Yeah, so Intel Capital is a very unique organization. It's been around 25 years, which makes it one of the longest running corporate venture programs in the world. Originally, it was set up as a traditional corporate development group within a large corporation and started growing really fast. And about 15 years ago, that's when I joined. We've scaled our operations to be a global organization. So today we have 60 investment professionals in over 20 countries. About a half of those investment professionals are based in the US and the other half outside of the US. We have grown to a size where we're now one of the most active technology investors in the world. Each year we deploy about $300 to $500 million per year broadly in IT ecosystem, and that includes the bread and butter, which is the semiconductor, but also services and the broader tech ecosystem, going from server technology to consumer wearable, Internet of Things, and everything in between. Reason for existence of Intel Capital is mainly for creating an ecosystem. If you look at Intel's own business model, it's been really driven by what's known as a Moore's Law. I assume everyone's familiar with that, which means that Intel tends to innovate much faster than its peers or its customers or ecosystem in general, which require someone or some group of people to create a new marketplace, which didn't exist. And we figured out about 20 years ago that one of the better ways to create a new ecosystem was through external activities and through venture capital activities. So venture capital is a critical part of Intel Corporation's corporate strategy, has been for a very long time. I believe it will continue to be a key part of our corporate strategy going forward. A main focus has been around creating an ecosystem. But as the technology industry develops and moves even faster nowadays than it was 10, 20 years ago, we also function the role of strategy and acquisition and other needs. So broadly, we look at ourselves as being the eyes and ears of the corporation.
Well, actually, Marc, I thought it was the other way around. I mean, Intel is known for creating products that cannibalize their previous generation products every 2 years.
That's right.
So this is a very disruptive process, and guess what? You are disrupting yourself all the time.
That's right. That's right.
So how is that? I guess being part of the Intel Capital environment, it enables that disruption in a much more organic way.
That's right. Intel's kind of unique even within the technology industry because our business model, once again, is so profound business model is a Moore's Law. To Leo's point, it disrupts ourselves, which really encourages whole organization to look for next disruption because our business model is dependent on disruption and creating standards. So through venture capital, which is a just great vehicle to identify disruptive technologies, that we can lead or we can own or we can have access to through ecosystem, through creating standards and through partnerships. So that's how the venture capital is used within the context of disruption, right?
So Marc, and you've obviously in a hub of the Silicon Valley, and we all heard about Silicon Valley, doing the $10 million seed investment opportunities, creating something from nothing with lots of big money. This must be a change in the way early stage investment is happening right now.
Yeah, just like any other industries, the investing industry has been changing as well in a very interesting way. And it's happening not only in Silicon Valley, but around the world. One of the unique advantages that we have at Intel Capital is the fact that we have invested in more than 50 countries. So we get to see different type of developments across the world, from US to Asia to Europe and Canada, obviously. And one of the key trends, obviously developing in Silicon Valley, is emergence of micro VCs.
Micro VCs?
Micro VCs.
Okay.
I don't know if many of you have heard that term.
That's called the Canadian Venture Capital Fund. Sorry, guys.
And then the fact that a lot of entrepreneurs, experienced entrepreneurs, are angel investors. So everyone down my street in my town are angel investors, whether they're
Actually, I'm going to be walking. Marc has invited me to visit him. I'm going to ask him to visit his home and then knock on the doors one at a time and see whether we can get some funding here.
And surprisingly, the angel investing is becoming very accessible to a lot of people in Silicon Valley, where you don't have a professional investing background. You can be an entrepreneur, you can be a manager, you can be working in different places, and you can invest as little as $5,000 in a company and get into investing or engaging with a startup. So that's one example.
The one that's really interesting to me is the $10 million guy.
The $10 million guy. That doesn't happen a whole lot, but it does happen. We were actually part of one of the largest seed funding round in Silicon Valley. That was a $20 million round. Why did it happen? Why did we participate in it? It was one of the largest exit from Stanford's computer science program. I think at one time about 20 students and a couple professors left to start a company, and they were able to attract $20 million from about 5 tier 1 investors in Silicon Valley. I think the reason why it happens is obviously there's a lot of capital. That's one reason, obvious reason, practical reason why that happens. But in this case, why it was able to attract that kind of capital is because just the ideas they were going after were such a big ideas. And the people who were involved with that idea was such a big name, or proven entrepreneurs or proven engineers, that the idea comes together with the money, and the environment can really foster the type of funding. Another thing I think Silicon Valley does better than most other location is that while it's getting to more short-term gain in terms of investing, people are willing to make big bets. And you guys probably heard this before, but culturally it's very acceptable to fail. And people are willing to make bets. And the way Silicon Valley financed some of its companies is that because they know there will be failure through or many experimentation through developing a company, instead of funding a company for 3 months or 6 months, they'll fund a company for 2 years, which gives them a lot of latitude as to experiment with the different technologies, different customers, and through the process, hopefully they'll figure out a product that works.
So Marc, when you take that kind of a longer-term view on the investing, you're investing more on the team than you're investing in the idea. Although the idea initially is important, but you're actually saying that what's happening in that process, the investor says, I know that this team is going to figure it out, whether it's experiment number 1 or experiment number 3, I'm going to be able to give them enough latitude to keep on trying.
That's right.
And have you been on any of these boards or invested in any of these that you saw kind of actually getting to where they needed to be, or they keep on trying and they are now 10 years later they are still trying?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I actually, in the group that I manage, we have 60 portfolio companies, so I get to see all different situations where, in situations where things don't work, you have to replace the CEO. So CEOs are not permanent.
Oh, it never happened.
Yeah. Once again, that's something that's more acceptable in a Silicon Valley context, where if things are not working, you need to make some changes in the management team, right? So it's not a permanent position. In terms of the pivots that companies make, it's really a collaborative process from an investor point of view. So if I, as an investor, want to work with the best entrepreneurs that I can find, however, there is a collaborative process between the entrepreneur and investor, because investors do bring certain value add to the table from experience, from connections and everything else. And also there is another component, which is ecosystem, right? Which is not just the entrepreneur, it's not just, I'm going to give you $20 million, go figure it out. That almost never works. You need to help from the investor base, but also the ecosystem, you call it mentors in an accelerator setting, but really introduction to the customer, introduction to other specialists. So if you're creating a widget A, in order to create a widget A, you need a lot of different experts. And it's going to be very difficult to have all different expertise in a company to be successful. But the best companies, through investor network, through ecosystem network, find those expertise.
Interesting.
And in some ways, they outsource that, right? Because it's impossible to get all those expertise into the company. It's too expensive to hire those people. So it's really getting access to those expertise and making the best choice as you go through the process of building the company.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So any exciting new technologies that you've seen? Obviously, we've heard many. Anything that you'd want to share, that things that would create us to look at it and say, wow, now, I wish I invested in that.
There's just so many things happening right now in the technology world. I've been in Silicon Valley for 15 years and seen a couple of cycles. Obviously, each cycle is very different. I think this cycle is just amazing in terms of the fundamentals that's there. And from a consumer perspective, what's really driving this cycle is really the adoption of smartphones around the globe. And entrepreneurs are finally being able to leverage that adoption into monetization. So that's really the fundamental big trend there. And as it relates to enterprise, I think it's a really adoption of cloud. It changes everything, right?
So what do you think cloud? How does cloud make it different, aside from the fact that it's accessible?
Right. So I think the biggest thing is being accessible, make everything accessible. Everyone talks about being able to have access anytime, anywhere you want. I think that's really such a fundamental change in how companies are built. So you really have to internalize what that means as an entrepreneur, as an investor, right? So those two things are really the driving forces as I see it in the next 5 years. In terms of other areas where Intel is very interested in excitement is areas like drones. We think it's fascinating from a
drones.
Computing perspective. We got a lot of drones out here. We're also very fascinated by Bitcoin, not necessarily as a currency, but the infrastructure it creates and the potential disruption into financial industry. We're also very fascinated by what's happening in the food technology and industries. Not too many people talk about it, but the amount of innovation, access, in terms of delivery, preparation, the quality that goes to different business models around food technology is fascinating, and that's manifesting around the world, right?
Very cool.
Some of those are areas that we're actively investing in. For me personally, we're investing heavily into education technology because the marriage of cloud and big data and smartphone is has a potential to bring a lot of disruption into education, both formal education as well as outside of school.
Wow. So these are investable companies that deliver some sort of educational content, and you're using the cloud and using the big data to target the content much more effectively. Is that some of the investments you made?
Yeah. So I'll answer a couple different ways. We recently invested last year a company called Schoology. They're SaaS-based content management platform sells into schools. It's really Facebook for schools, and they connect teachers, parents, and students together and deliver content through that mechanism.
Very cool.
And then what they do is they obviously leverage cloud to deliver that service directly to schools, but also have the most modern technology in terms of social components interacting between teachers and parents and students. So things like that is very, very interesting to us. Now, going back to your earlier question, why do we give so much money? In this company, the two founders were in their mid-20s. And they raised, we were part of the round, they raised about $15 million, which is a typical Series B round, and the company is actually based in New York. The reason why we invest in them is really the founders feature unique characteristics.
21 years old was one of the elements?
Which we actually seen before in another one of our companies that we did, a company called Box Inc., which went public recently. So we do a lot of, as an investor, we do a lot of pattern recognition in terms of what the success is required in terms of the team composition, but also business model. And this is a case where, we got that pattern recognition going, so we made a very successful investment in the company.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And that's an ongoing investment right now?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, it's interesting that also I know that from your other experiences you've been investing a lot in media, and certainly I am always fascinated by these amazing new things called augmented reality and virtual reality. There is a company, as many of you may know, here in Ottawa called eSight that's using a version of what we would now call augmented reality for medical purposes by actually enabling people with limited sight to have an improved sight. But how does that manifest right now in Silicon Valley with Oculus that has been sold for some ridiculously large amount of money?
$2 billion.
$2 billion.
It's
right.
not $18 billion.
That's true. It's not WhatsApp. It's actually real, so it's only worth $2 billion.
Yeah.
So how does that look?
Yeah. I answer two different ways. From Intel's perspective, one of the areas that we are investing heavily is around what we call perceptual computing. It's an interaction between machines and humans. And there's been an evolution of how humans have interacted with the machines, right? From a mouse to touch screens and different gestures with your eye tracking. And I think virtual reality is kind of a continuum of that. And Intel is investing heavily into that continuum where we think that there can be additional disruptions and innovations about how humans interact with the machines. And machines are defined very broadly. It's not just a computer. It's what we define as the Internet of Things, right? So we believe in a world where every device would have a computing capability. People call it connected. You can call it connected computing or smart devices, right? So fundamentally, we're going to have to interact with these devices as human beings in some way or shape. So I think virtual reality, augmented reality kind of fits into different ways of interacting with the different devices or experiences.
Right.
And the gaming is the one that's entertainment, it's leading that as a leading application in the environment. From a Facebook or other internet companies' perspective, they're looking at this as a platform strategy, right? Everyone in the Silicon Valley, large tech companies have this view of, I need to own a platform because everything is open, everything is interconnected. So the name of the game for large technology companies is that I need to own the ecosystem or I need to own a platform. So the reason why someone pays it $2 billion is that they view it as a platform which they can build additional services on top of it. Right, so I'm sure Facebook will be opening up the platforms to developers. And once you own the platform, it becomes a very valuable asset.
So it's a way of building an ecosystem around the company and maybe the technology that the company is bringing in, like a virtual reality platform or augmented reality platform. And it's really not related specifically to the instance of whatever they bought or the product that actually manifests itself today, but it is what they can evolve into, which is probably yet unknown, and it's a journey that's...
The key trend related to that is in the US, the smartest kids in the US are now all moving to San Francisco. One of the reasons why...
Some of them are coming to Ottawa, by the way.
One of the reasons why the apartment rentals are highest now in San Francisco in the country, right?
Is that right?
More so than New York.
So what would be a...
I think like a one bedroom would cost about $3,500 per month, right?
Wow.
Right. So all these young kids are making $100,000 right out of school, but they're paying most of that into apartment rentals.
You think that's smart?
I think that's, yeah.
So maybe they are not that smart. I don't. But you're saying, so there's in fact a lot of influx.
There's a lot of influx of very young, talented minds. And these are not just computer science majors, right? These are history major, poli-sci majors from all different walks of life just coming into Silicon Valley because it allows them to, in their mind, fix things in their mind that doesn't work well, right? And it can be in any industry, from a financial industry to food, to education, to government, anything that's out there, people are coming in and trying to reimagine. And that's really one of the most popular words in Silicon Valley right now, which is to reimagine the world. What if world was this way and that way, using mostly cloud and smartphones to change the world.
Well, I guess the barrier to entry for creating these new dreams or instantiating is now much lower. The technology is much more accessible, the quality of the tools is much more user-friendly. You don't need to have as much education to use the tools to create the initial instantiation of your product.
That's right.
Or the ideation elements are very friendly. And you figure that in California, in Silicon Valley, this is a hot environment and people feel comfortable. Well, one of these days we may actually be able to create such an equally hot environment right here in Ottawa. And I don't mean temperature-wise, but yes. Well, we'll see. Anyway, that's really great. I'm glad that we were able to share some of the views and where you are and what you're doing. And maybe I'd like to see whether anybody from the audience would like to ask Marc any questions.
We've got the roving mic here, so we're certainly able to. All right, just give me a second to do my best Phil Donahue and get over there.
Hi, I'm David Brown. Marc, thanks for sharing this morning. You mentioned earlier when
Speak up.
You mentioned earlier when you seek out investments, you do some pattern recognition. I wondered if you care to share some of the elements of that pattern recognition with us, please?
Yeah. There are several things that we look at, and it really depends on the stage of the company as well. So depending on the stage and depending on the business model of the company, the pattern recognition changes slightly, but the core items are really around management team. So I give you a couple different examples, and there are a lot of studies that's been done around how to compose a management team of a startup. So we rarely I personally am very biased against investing into one founder situation for various reasons. Two founders are the most optimal from a pattern recognition perspective. More than two founders can be challenging as well. And I can spend more time describing about it. When you have 6 founders and they split their equity 6 different ways, then when times get tough, there isn't one leader who can stand up and say, I'm going to carry this forward, right? So that's one example where the founders. Second is actually maybe relevant to this audience as well, is I really like looking at funding history of a startup. The funding history tells me everything I need to know about this company. You don't have to tell me anything about you. I can just look at the funding history and say what kind of history you've gone through as a company, and type of the instrument, whether it's a loan or an equity, the timing of that, and then some of the terms that's included in the funding history tells me a lot of things that I want to know about the company. So that's another kind of pattern recognition. Another thing that we do is really the hiring of the team and how the management is set up, but also the engineering talent, right? So we look at whether they were put together by a team that worked before, or put together by hired guns, essentially by investors or some other connections. So those are some of the things that we look at consistently across the companies, and depending on the stage of the company, we'll look at various different things. Yeah.
Thank you. Great. Raise your hand nice and high if you'd like to ask a question. I'll make my way over to you. Okay. Elsa, maybe you could just grab that for me.
Thank you for your comments. Both yourself and your colleagues must see a heck of a lot of PowerPoint. Yes. In the pitches. And in the spirit of innovation that we're talking about this morning, do you think down the road there might be a better way to pitch your company other than slide decks?
Very good question. I think it really comes down to storytelling. Investors make decisions based on pattern recognition and numbers and everything else, but also through gut feelings and prior experiences and storytelling. So when I first meet with the entrepreneur, I actually prefer to have it just without PowerPoint discussion, because I want to really understand the thought process of an entrepreneur. Ask some random questions and see how they respond to those random questions, and not get frustrated because I'm asking random questions, right? When it comes to partner meetings, when you're doing more formal presentation and reviews, I think the PowerPoint is still as good as it comes. A lot of times, what we force entrepreneurs to do is to really write down their ideas in a Word document. So flesh out more ideas about really the thesis of the company or the purpose of the company, right? So.
Great, thank you. Next question.
Hi, Lucia Harper. I'd like to know if you're seeing in pitching and marketing the ever-increasing trend toward cultural competency, and if you're seeing that language entering your marketplace.
Can you elaborate a little bit more about cultural competency?
where the needs of cross-cultural competency are being met within technology platforms, linguistics, language in general, in terms of garnering an audience in the venture capital world?
Okay, so let's see if I understand it. So more from a diversity perspective?
And intergenerational as well, between millennials, traditionalists, and boomers.
Yeah. So absolutely. Diversity is one of the biggest topics in Silicon Valley right now, actually, among technology companies.
It is very topical, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's a very topical. I'm sure some of you are familiar with the lawsuit that's been going on with the Klein and Perkins partnership, but also in a big, large corporations. There is a dedicated effort, I suppose, all around Silicon Valley, and Intel is actually leading that effort. We announced a $300 million diversity fund about 4 months ago at CES in front of 99% male audience to really encourage diversity in technology. There are a lot of issues, actually, multi-layer, right? What people talk about is really at the senior level, at the boardroom level, and the CEO level, but there are also issues at the entry level as well in terms of creating the pipeline of women as well as underrepresented minority, and then also cultivating those talent through the process, right? So that's really a hot topic. A lot of companies are taking action. We're taking action through direct investment into woman-owned enterprises. So we set up a dedicated fund where we're actively seeking and investing in companies that are founded by female around the world. And then we have a internal program where supporting underrepresented minorities come through corporate environment, and we have a mentorship program, we have outreach program to work with the NGOs around the world and universities around the world identifying these talents. At the end of the day, Silicon Valley, I suppose, is a meritocracy, and anyone who has the drive and skill set to succeed, I think there are a lot of opportunities to succeed in Silicon Valley. But also, I think there's ever more increasing awareness that alone is not sufficient, and we need to do more to integrate the minority, whether it's age-based or race-based or gender-based, into the broader community.
So do you think there is so you mentioned two interesting funds. Being of the age that I am, I would love to have a fund where everybody has to be 50 years or older.
There is one.
There is one?
There is one. There is one,
okay.
actually. Yeah.
Excellent.
What's that called?
AARP.
AARP?
Yes.
Is that an Intel fund?
No, it's a I don't know, are you guys familiar with the AARP? It's an American... there you go. There you go.
Okay, interesting.
They're targeting specifically technologies that cater to 50 plus.
Oh, I see. But that's not so much the team. It's
Team,
more
it's not so much at the team.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, our next question is actually right over here as well.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for coming. You were saying that Intel Capital has invested in 50 countries around the world. I wanted to ask you, outside of Silicon Valley, what do you think are the most interesting startup ecosystems out there right now?
Yeah, very good question. It really depends on what you're looking for, right? So if you're looking at certain things like perceptual computing, we're looking at Eastern Europe, right? Surprisingly, there are a lot of, Western Europe. Surprisingly, there are a lot of great stuff coming out of France, Spain, and UK around perceptual computing, eye tracking, a lot of those innovations. If you're looking at more consumer trends, we're looking at Korea and perhaps China. If you're looking at security technologies or some fundamental technologies, we're looking at Israel, right? So from my perspective, fundamentally, there are only a few countries that continue to innovate in terms of a startup context that I think matters. Some people disagree, but for me, those are Israel, North America, Korea, Japan, and to a certain extent, China, where we are seeing innovation in terms of the core fundamental technology or business models, right? Which is another important aspect to technology ecosystem. And most of other countries tend to be more of a followers. They do have their own unique twist for their local markets in terms of business models. But really the core technology innovation, going from enterprise software to silicon to consumer technology, smartphone, cloud, those are the areas that we think are very interesting. We are finding a very unique, interesting opportunities coming out from Eastern Europe. As Estonia, Romania, Hungary, Russia, very unique things coming out of those countries. Great engineering talent. And obviously success breeds more success. Right.
Great. Okay, another question right here.
Bruce Lazenby from Invest Ottawa. Intel has made a big deal around IPR and patents over its life, but it seems to me that is just not sustainable. The USPTO is pretty badly broken. There's just so much out there and so much litigation. What's the future of IPR? How are people going to protect their products?
Yeah, actually, one of my friends' wife just got appointed to the patents office. That's a probably better question for her. Yeah, I mean, it's a big mess. I don't have a very strong views on it. In a startup context, in the things that we invest in, patents are becoming, I would say, less relevant. It's still very important. But the things that the Silicon Valley is investing in right now, the patent in general are becoming less relevant than it was 10 years ago. And part of that is the things that are getting a lot of capital traction right now are not really hardcore sciences, right? And when venture investors look at companies that are dependent on hardcore sciences and patents, actually, because of the issues that you mentioned, they're shying away from some of those investments.
Wow, that's a very different trend from what used to be, where the second question from every VC
what's your patent?
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm not trying to say there aren't. There are still a group of people who still invest in the hardcore science and patent-driven companies. But if you look at the trend going forward, most investment that Silicon Valley or tech industry is making is less dependent on patents.
So there must be a reason why this very important element that used to be so critical to what was called the jewels of the company is being set aside. Is that the protection is no longer needed, or the technology is so innovative so quickly that having yesterday's patent may not be as interesting, and therefore the investment community is shying away from it?
Yeah. I think part of that is true. Another aspect is, in general, technology industry is going to a much more open ecosystem. Everything is much more accessible. The use of APIs, everyone's willing to share. There's a really trend-wise, companies are not built on some secret necessarily. They're succeeding because they can out-execute their competitors. Right.
So the team execution is a key element of how...
Right. And then the barrier to entry in a lot of those areas are very low, and simply because they're using standard open technologies that's available to pretty much everyone. Right. That's why patent is becoming less of an issue from an investor point of view. From a big company perspective, it continues to be a huge issue. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We've got time for probably a couple more questions. I'll do one right here.
Zhen Liang from Visco Technology. My question comes back to the ecosystem. So from outsiders' point of view, from fresh like someone from Silicon Valley, when they go to Ottawa, what ecosystem in Ottawa is more or less, attractive, if not competitive, from your point of view?
Okay. I don't know if I understand the question. So what things are attractive from an investor point of view? Or
in Ottawa, in this town,
Yeah.
what ecosystem we have is attractive from your point of view, from an investor?
Oh, okay. I don't know Ottawa that well, so I need to generalize what I know about
We'll
Ottawa.
invite you again quite a number
Exactly,
of times.
yeah.
So make
I
sure
think I
you
need-
get to know Ottawa very well.
Yeah. Maybe I can use an analogy to like Washington D.C. ecosystem, right? Because it's the central government and the government-related areas. In the U.S., the hotbed obviously is Silicon Valley, and then the next used to be Boston because of all the universities around there. Boston has really lost its leadership to New York over the last 5 years, and New York has really emerged as a center because of a lot of different industries that's based in New York. There aren't particularly too many universities technical universities in New York per se compared to Boston, right? But there are a lot of industries in New York that's been attracting a lot of ecosystem. Compared to DC, DC has a pretty interesting characteristics as well, right? All the government funding, a lot of technical universities surrounding that area, but it hasn't really prospered as much from a venture context. And it's really hard to understand why. But if you really analyze it, it really comes back to culture of the town. Washington, D.C. tend to be much more formal than San Francisco or New York. Washington, D.C. Doesn't have an investor base that New York has. It doesn't have as much of diverse industries as perhaps Silicon Valley or New York, right? So when I look at Ottawa, what I know is that you have a concentration of obviously the federal government here, and then history of enterprise software companies here. So my I guess suggestion to the audience here is that you got to leverage what you have. But to your earlier point, you really have to work together as a community, because it's not just entrepreneurs, it's not just the investor base, it's everything else that matters, right? It is the executive and the other companies, the government employee. Everyone needs to embrace culturally that this matters, and we're going to embrace the innovation. Then the grassroots starts. The money doesn't solve the problem at all. Money is just one small component to creating a very robust ecosystem. So it's really creating a culture through this kind of meetings and networking and sharing stories. And successful entrepreneurs really giving back to the community is really the best way to start that.
I think one of the things I see in Silicon Valley is this close community and a very friendly feeling between the young entrepreneur and the serial entrepreneur. The serial entrepreneur may have been in a company in different aspects as it grew, initially maybe a junior member of the company, eventually a more senior member, and eventually a founder. And once they have succeeded or even just created a few companies, they are passionate about the fact that they are able to have been to where they are and are sharing that. I think we have that here, maybe less so than we could have, and maybe a more active involvement would be interesting. But tell me a little bit about how does the university crowd interact with this older serial entrepreneurial crowd who kind of been there, done that, and now the young guns are coming in and saying, well, you guys actually don't know anything about anything because we know everything there is to be. How does that work?
Yeah, there is some generational gap. To earlier question in Silicon Valley, right? You're like 40 years old in Silicon Valley. You're old. You're really old in Silicon Valley. You go to companies in San Francisco. Most of the companies are run by kids in 20. But a lot of it is actually perception. There are as many companies in the Silicon Valley that's founded by people in their 40s and 50s.
Serial entrepreneurs.
Serial entrepreneurs. They continue to find the company, right? So this whole perception about Silicon Valley is run by 20 years old is not accurate, right? There are equal amount of people there that are more experienced. The interaction really happens in many different ways. There's cocktail events every night in every town throughout Silicon Valley, right? From all the way from San Jose to San Francisco. So there's a tremendous amount of networking based on the industry you're in, based on the schools that you went to, based on other interest groups, right?
So you mentioned that they were cocktail events. So actually, I was imagining drinking rather than networking. But yes,
yeah.
So you say there are many. Is this a daily event? I mean, you can look up any little town and there'll be 15 events simultaneously.
Yeah, it's amazing the level of activities, level of events. And when you drive, I'm sure many of you have been to Silicon Valley, when you drive in 101, it feels like, what is this? Right? It's just like any other town in 101. There's a couple buildings that you see, and there isn't much there to see. All the activities goes on, obviously people working really, really hard in their offices, but through some of these networking events that happens on a constant basis. And another thing that investors do is really facilitate those kind of introductions. Investors,
they are facilitating the networking activity.
Yeah. So many large investor groups have what's known as EIR, Enterprise in Residence. These are ex-CEOs, ex-entrepreneurs who's been successful. They join a venture group as an advisor or in-house entrepreneurs. And their job is continuously cultivate a network of people, whether it's young or old or in many different shapes and forms, to incubate ideas. And a lot of times they incubate companies within the venture firm, right? Now, ideas can come from anyone.
Right.
And a lot of good ideas come from young people because they want to fix the world, right? And the fundamental idea of fixing the world, you can have a lot of great ideas, right? And then investors tend to help those group of people connect with the perhaps more experienced people to set up a company and form a partnership or find a customer. So that's a big part of what the investors do. Another big part is there's a huge cottage industry in Silicon Valley where there's just everything for everyone, right? So which means that there's accelerator for starting company, there's accelerator for European startup, there's accelerator for Asian startup, there's accelerator for Canadians, there's a school for raising money, there's school for finding another founder, technical founder. So there's so much infrastructure that's being set up in Silicon Valley. It's been that way, but over the last 5 years, it really accelerated. So everything you need to start a company, there's some place you can go and get help.
Right. Well, here in Ottawa, Elspark is doing that.
Exactly. When you can have a one-stop shop, why bother with the,
Well, so far it's one stop. Eventually, I think we'll grow and become sufficient that we'll have multiples, and therefore the ability of an entrepreneur to pick and choose is going to be great. But for now, we'll do what we can with Elspark. Carry on.
Gentlemen, actually, I think I'll transition. Gentlemen, that's all the time we have for Q&A. I'll just speak loudly until the mic comes on. There we go. Thank you very much for that time spent and the insights that you shared. We really appreciate you visiting us.